Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing Our Children 2018 World Summit. I'm Alison Morris from Full Potential Parenting, and I'm your host, and I want to welcome you to another interview. My guest today is Tamara Arnold, who has just all sorts of fascinating things going on. She spent most of her life being afraid to use her voice, afraid it would upset people she loved most in her life who suffered from mental illness, and that fear kept her from connecting to what she calls her stardust and realizing that she had the gift of reading energy. And so she's now written a couple books. First one is called My Kid is Driving Me Crazy, a mom's survival guide for living with a child with mental illness. And then we're going to talk about what happened after she wrote that book, how her life changed considerably since that time. And more recently, she's written a second book called The Magical Business Method, which we will get to more. She is from Canada, and I am just really excited to chat with her today. So welcome to the summit. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alison. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to connect with everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most of the folks watching this, the parents anyway, can relate to My Kid is Driving Me Crazy. And well, we might laugh at the title. It's actually sort of sad too, right? Because there's a lot of pain underlying that that concept. So can you tell us a little bit about what your journey was with your son?
Absolutely. I'm just going to tie it back a little bit because I grew up in a household with mental illness. So from a very young age, like from the age of 10, I don't really remember anything but, living with somebody who has depression. So I tried to run away at a very young age from it. So like by 17, I'd moved out of the house and I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I don't need to be around this. And so I decided that at 19, it was a good idea to try and find love. That it could be my own, that wasn't from my family, and I got pregnant with the first person that I ever slept with at the age of 19. And so I had my son when he was 20, and it was an immediate thing, his mental illness. And one would say that we question whether it's nature or nurture, right? But his biological father was a kleptomaniac. And by the time Ethan was 5, he was stealing. And I thought it was really not wonderful, but fascinating in a sense that he had no contact with his biological father, right? Mm. But we would go places and he didn't know what he was doing was wrong. Now, by the time I met my daughter's father, Ethan was 8, and that's where things actually exploded, if you will. I know that mental illness doesn't really peak until the child reaches about 8, and I got pregnant with my daughter, and Ethan went to the drawer in my kitchen and like rattled it and opened it, and he took a big knife out and he said, I'm going to cut myself from here to here. And I was like, I don't think that that's supposed to happen. I don't think this is what 8-year-olds talk about. And everything was very graphic, death pictures and things like that. So from the time he was 8, everything got worse and worse. So he was diagnosed with ADHD at 8, but it was like a quick 20-minute interview, and I was like, how can you diagnose that quickly? Where's the testing? Like, what did you do? To like steamrolling, I thought if I smothered him with love, it would get better, and instead it only got worse. It turned into depression, anxiety, and oppositional defiance disorder. Now, oppositional defiance disorder, if anyone else has a child with oppositional defiance disorder, it is the mental illness of not listening, really is how I put it. Some have like aggressive behaviors. Ethan never had aggressive behaviors, but there was constant behaviors of doing the opposite of what he was being asked or told. Nothing was ever easy. And he was very depressed, so this affected his ability to love himself, and he was very suicidal, so he has suicidal tendencies, and his behaviors just got elevated and elevated and elevated. And when he was 16, it affected the house so tremendously. The other 3 kids and my husband and I, we weren't sleeping. Like, we weren't sleeping. We would take turns keeping one eye open to make sure that Ethan was safe. He wasn't hurting himself. He wasn't sneaking out. He wasn't doing any behaviors. And so we, as parents, got to a place of like, I couldn't even function anymore. Like I couldn't make it through my days. It was a very challenging time. And so I walked into the laundry room of my basement, and Ethan had a chair and a cord. And I just remember standing there and going like, what is happening right now? And so we were able to get him into what I thought was going to be the Utopia hospital. And because it was like something you hear about, like if you can just get them into this place, everything will get better. And so he finally made it into this place, right? And I remember going to the hospital and I'm thinking, great, they're going to take care of him. They're going to put him through a program. They're going to do something that's really going to be the thing that's going to help him. And they looked at us on day one and said he should be home in the next day or two. And I was like, he just had a chair and a cord in my laundry. Like, he can't come home. Like, he's not well. And so they said they would keep him for a week. And I made a really a hardest decision as a parent. And at 16, I asked my son to get help. And if he couldn't get help, he couldn't come home because it was not a healthy place for anyone there. And my 16-year-old son said that I'm going to choose living on the streets. As you have kids, this is the most devastating thing. So I started to spiral into my own depression after that. Like it was the hardest thing. I thought at that time it was the hardest thing. But by the time he was 17, his behaviors had escalated to a point that were toxic. And I told Ethan that we couldn't be in each other's lives, that we were done. And then we severed all ties altogether. And that actually ended up being the hardest thing I'd ever done.
What were the options before him when at 16? What was the sort of the get help or get out?
So all I wanted him to do, so he had actually lived in a mental health residence for 9 months as well. So like we had already tried to solve this problem by putting him in a facility that would be teaching him, life skills, anger issues, all these kinds of things in a way that would make him more functional in society or by society's standards. Because looking back, I don't think that all of this had to have happened the way it had to based on, the way the mental health system is set up sometimes. But anyway, there was a point where I couldn't do it on my own. And so he had to agree to go into a mental health institute. And he was in grade 7 at the time, going to and he chose to go into this residence so that we could work on our relationship. So by the time that choice came at 16, it was he could go back to that residence and learn how to do more effective life skills and all those kinds of things, or he could seek going into a retreat, a rehabilitation style facility to curb some of his addictions and other things going on and come home. So he had multiple choices in which he could choose to do some work on himself and get to a place where coming home was a good choice, like the only option, but he wouldn't do either of those.
So I can sort of try to imagine, but I can't really imagine what that must have felt like. Lots of different emotions must have been front and center. And with you, with your other kids, and I imagine a huge mix of guilt and maybe some relief, and then guilt about the relief. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about all that, how that all affected you. And plus fear, I'm sure, for his physical safety, for just,
This is where, we always, if we're not feeling our feelings, we tend to find alternative ways to mask what's really going on. And so when Ethan's behaviors were at their peak, I tended to drink a little bit more than that wine got a little bit more tasty in order to numb some of the emotions that came up with it. However, when 16 to 17 came, that was a really tumultuous year emotionally. I gained a lot of weight. I felt terrible. I was failing him as a mother. I couldn't let anybody know. If anybody knew how bad things were, then they would blame me, because if I made the problem, I was to fix it. Like, this was all my fault. I ruined him. I was terrible. Like, there was a lot of emotional angst that was going on for me. Now, it affected not only me, it affected my relationship with my husband at the time, like my current husband, not at the time, he's still my husband, but we've only been together 5 years. So he really walked in right before the pinnacle and peak of all of this started to take off. And so our relationship took a hit emotionally, physically, all sorts of things. But the one thing that didn't take a hit was my other children, because we didn't tell them any. We never let what Ethan was doing be like something that was known to the other kids, because they were young. Like they were, 6 and 8 years younger than him. So as he's like 7, they're like 9 and 10. This is not something that 9 and 10-year-olds want to be having in their day-to-day life. But when Ethan and I were like fully done at 17, that's when I actually say my life began, once I got through the darkest of depressions over what my choice had been. So when you say, it's not easy it's a physical, emotional, spiritual, like it takes you right down. And then for me, what happened was, you asked, how do you get over, is my son okay? Right? And so when I was in this fetal position, in the lazy boy chair every day, thinking, what have I done? Like, how could I do this? What if anyone finds out? I started to change my story to be, what could I do today to feel a little bit better than I did yesterday? And so I actually turned to meditation at that point. And it was like a meditation with the angels series. And this is what would ultimately lead me down a completely separate road. But one of the things that I learned is that if we try and hold responsibility in our small little tiny human bodies, like I couldn't look after Ethan, right? Like I didn't know where he was, but there are many powers, no matter who you pray to, right, that are far more capable of looking after my son than I would be. And so I asked every day for Source to be my eyes and my ears and ensure that he was safe every single day. And that was a huge helper for me in releasing the burden from, it was my responsibility.
I want to talk about that a whole lot more, but can we go back a little bit to just how consuming all of this had been for you? And because I think a lot of parents feel like, oh gosh, as their kids' behaviors get worse, they get more and more sort of sucked into the drama and the trauma. And I mean, you talk about gaining a lot of weight. I put on a ton of weight myself the last couple of years, working on that now. But it's like, wow, look at, like physical manifestation of stress. Bingo, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then, you start to lose yourself, and it's like you don't know who you are anymore. You don't feel like you have time for anything for yourself anymore. Self-care sounds great in theory, but in practice, it's like, what the heck does that mean for me? Because then what people are, start fantasizing about week-long vacations off somewhere nice, when realistically that's not likely to happen for most people. And wonderful if it is, but you can't bring your kids on those vacations because they're acting up or you're sabotaging everything. And who's going to take care of your kids if you tried to go, all this stuff, right? So it's just like exhausting mentally, physically, spiritually. So I assume you were in that same place.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, because I often just skip from him being 8 to the stuff at 16 and 17. But there was a lot, and it's because it's challenging to go back into those times, because I wasn't actually living within myself. You become your child, right? And so when things got even to, by the time Ethan was in grade 6, he was cutting himself at school. And the school wouldn't let him back in because they didn't have things set up for a child like him. And my job wouldn't let me go down to part-time and work between the hours that he was in school. And not to mention that, but the school would only let Ethan back for an hour and 15 minutes only in a day. And then who was gonna take your child and pick them up when he can only go? And then he was allowed to stay for 2 blocks, but he wasn't allowed to stay for recesses. So I had to like drop him off for an hour and 15, pick him up for 20 minutes, and then drop him back off for an hour and 15 and pick him up.
Basically completely impossible, not sustainable schedule for anybody.
No. So when you have a child with mental illness, everything, we get into what I call a protected state of this is just what I have to do in order to get things done. And it really pulls us out of who we are, what we want, anything. And we become our child, if you will. It becomes a very codependent, very like unhealthy, because as parents we want to protect our child as well, and we're told like we have to do everything for our child, and so we create a life that is based solely around what their needs are and how we can help them and how we can make it better and how we can get them to more appointments and what kind of appointments and what kind of things are available to them. And then it becomes all about them, and we're getting pulled further and further into their life. We think about them when we're not that with them. Like I used to go out and be like, if I leave right now I could probably go home and catch Ethan doing something he shouldn't be doing, and right. So like now, even when I'm trying to have my own personal time, it's not about me still. It's still being pulled back into the house over what is Ethan doing right now. And like, so like you get into this place where you no longer exist.
Right. And you, again, you get to a place where you feel like you don't deserve any time for yourself because
you did this.
Right. You know, and because they need it so much, they need your help more than you need your own help, and which is not healthy. But I think it's really easy trap for people to fall down in this sort of funnel that you start to spiral down into. Yeah. And hopefully most folks don't get to the point that you reached where, they're having to sort of send their kid out into the world. But how, and of course, there are different services available in different places, and, folks are watching from all around the world. So some of these situations won't be entirely analogous to what you might have where you live. But leaving all that aside, how did, so you found meditation.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Uh-huh.
I'm just going to say, like, I do understand that Ethan, my story is what I call extreme parenting. Like, I call it the extreme story. It's like, there's like your children misbehave. Like, they all have like some pushback on parents and things like that. And then you have the middle ground where, they have behaviors, but they're not to the point where you have to make extreme decisions. Like what was going on with in my life at that time was all encompassing, but it was encompassing because we had an extreme situation. And I totally honor the people that are going through extreme situations right now, because it is something that nobody else will ever understand or know unless you are living it. And so looking back, if I could have given myself some ideas or some ways in which I could have made this easier for both myself and Ethan, is it all started to come clear when you were saying when I started to do meditation, right? And so by doing the meditation, I actually started to I just have to tell this one story and this is where it kind of stems from, is like we lose who we are to the point that when Ethan, the very first night, Ethan was not in my house. Like, you can't come home, he's out of the hospital, everything. I remember walking into my living room, right? And going like, I don't know who I am. Like, I have zero idea who Tamara is anymore. And that was like this like silence of like unknown. It's like you could see that you have a road in front of you and you don't have to take appointments or do all of these other things anymore. And it was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me in my life, because I realized in that moment I had lost myself in being Ethan's mom. So through doing the meditation, I started to come back into my body, because this is where I've learned is the key, is that we are actually more capable of being better parents if we are from within, doing things for ourselves and shining our love light out, as opposed to being pulled out of our body and like the hamster wheel trying to catch up and do all the things for all the other people, right? It's like the oxygen mask on the plane.
Yeah, so I've never really thought about it this way before, but something you just said kind of struck me, that it's I don't know, it's like the push-pull, maybe not, well, maybe it is a push-pull. So, yeah, so that it can feel like they're sort of sucking everything out of you. that they're like the big vacuums, right? But they've got holes. So the vacuum doesn't take, right? Their buckets are leaky. They can never get filled up enough. And so there's just never enough of you to help them enough. And then you're just sucked dry, as opposed to, right, you take care of your own container, you plug all your own holes, and then you freely, willingly say, I'm offering this to you. Right? Is that a good way of sort of thinking about it?
It's
as opposed to it just being like pulled, and you're just like, wah. Yeah.
Right? And that is a beautiful way to look at it. It's 100% truth right there. Because again, however it presents to you, right? So the fact that was like, I'm like, yes, Alison, that's exactly what it is, right? Because when we give our energy to somebody who doesn't want our help, they are not going to treat it very nice. They're not going to respect it. They're not going to love it. They're not going to honor it. They're not going to listen to it. They're not going to care for it. They're not going to, give it that attention that it requires, right? Because it's still our energy and we're trying to help that person. So when our kids, and this is where this was the most powerful statement that I had to get to, was to detach myself emotionally from Ethan. So this is like if you're giving your energy and it's being leaked out because they're not doing whatever, right? I had to detach myself emotionally from my own son in order to get to a place where I could say, if he wasn't my son, right? If he wasn't my biological son, would I be giving all of this energy to him when he's not treating it nice? Would I let anybody else do to me or say these things or do anything, if like at all, ever, right? And it got to the point where the answer was a bright, blaring no. Nobody would ever treat me like I would never let myself be in this position any other way, right? Because, and this became a really anchoring point for me that I carried from that point on, was coming back into using your own energy for yourself to fill the buckets or to fill the holes, right? When you go to give your energy to other people, or you offer it even, and they're not treating it very nicely, to detach and say, would I let anybody else treat my energy this way?
Okay, let me stop you there, because I can hear some people, and I have some of this in my own head saying, okay, and I've done this too, right? In fact, I've told my child this, like, if you were not my child, XYZ, right, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't, this would never be happening. But is the mother-child relationship not different? I mean, isn't it supposed to require more of you? And, are we not supposed to have this incredible tie and this bond and a responsibility that does go above and beyond any other kind of relationship that we might have in our life? So can you just talk a little bit more about, how 100%. You see that?
100%, because like you have to remember, like if you could write a list of things that are your ceiling of the things that you just would never tolerate or would be okay, or you know what I mean, or like I said, it was extreme. My circumstances was extreme. I don't think that every parent goes through. There were lots of times where I would not say about my son, right? Like this is not okay. No, right? Like I always told him I will never tell his behaviors to anyone. That's his story to tell. But if you had a list of things, like if your child is physically hurtful, like physically aggressive with you and hurts you and physically punches or kicks or does any abuse to you, that's not okay, right? Like there are certain levels that, and I've seen parents, abuse is abuse, whether it's verbal, whether it's emotional, whether it's mental, whether it's physical. And having now worked with a lot of parents who have children with mental illness and seeing how long the abuse happens, because they are our kids and we are not supposed to ever not tolerate what they're doing and try and fix them, there is the fine line. But if you as a parent know what your ceiling is, if you're like, okay, if things get to this point, like this point, and you write that down and you look at that and you say like, okay, if they're breaking dishes, if they're, you know, kicking in my walls or punching my walls or hurting me or hurting their siblings or their animals or there's other things, that's beyond what a normal mother-child relationship is. And I know that we are meant to do, but by that point, I can guarantee you as a mother, you have done everything you could possibly do to help your child. And you can say that with confidence and love on yourself, because that's what I had to get to, is like, I did everything that I possibly could up until that point to ensure that I was, you know, dotting my I's, crossing my T's, making sure Ethan could be the best Ethan that he could possibly be. But it got to the point where the list of things was greater than what a mother-son relationship is. And it's when that happens that I was like, okay.
So can we talk a little bit about both first maybe the concept of not taking responsibility for fixing your kid, and what, again, how you got to the point where it wasn't up to you anymore. You didn't have to take that burden on any longer.
Oh yeah, that was therapy, man. I've been in therapy for years with my kid, like years and years and years and years to get through this. And so one of my things my therapist had said to me, and it was true, is that every single person's life starts at a different age, right? So like, you know, sometimes it starts at 16, sometimes it starts at 17, sometimes it starts at 25, sometimes it starts at 36. But there comes a point as a parent, we know we've done everything that we possibly can to make them, you know, independent little beings so that they can go off and live the life that is meant for them outside of us, that we've prepared them for, right? And having left home at 17 myself, it was like, oh, I can understand that statement. So like Ethan, getting him to 16 and 17, I was like, now I know I have done everything. There is nothing else I can do at this point that I already haven't done, that I already haven't tried, that I haven't included. It was the therapies, it was the groups, it was the, you know, extra, like giving time to, it didn't come that easily. Again, I'd started to do the meditation. I'd started to do the self-forgiveness, because you get to a point where you have to forgive yourself for this, right? And that's the ultimate in self-love, is when you can look at yourself and say that, like, I didn't do anything wrong. I did everything that I possibly could to help Ethan get to. And on a side note before, because I always forget to say this, Alison, Ethan and I only didn't talk for 6 months, right? Like, it was a 6-month window that we didn't talk, that he then came to me. But because we had broken these like really ingrained patterns of behavior and cycles, and I was willing to walk away, our life and everything we've built after that 6-month mark is completely different. 2 different people coming together to create a brand new relationship, because everything that had been happening before no longer existed. I always forget to say that it's a happy ending. And it is.
P.S. P.S. It all worked out.
It sounds really tragic, but there is a happy ending in all this. But if I hadn't done the work to forgive myself, right, and be at that space knowing that I had done everything that I possibly could as a mother, Ethan and I wouldn't have been able to come back and have a healthy relationship either.
Now, let me ask you this, because I had a separate conversation with another mom who's had a different, but in some respects slightly similar journey. And her child, in this case also a son, was also older, like 16, I think 16 or 17. And I'm wondering if that's like part of the key here. Like, do you working with parents who are coming to this realization and making changes when their children are younger? I mean, because there is a difference between when they are actually potentially able to make their way in the world versus an 8-year-old.
Okay,
right?
so yes, right? So, but the thing is like, it's still, the work is actually done on the parent.
Well, I was going to say, or does it have nothing to do actually with the age of the child, and it's all about the work that we need to do to get ourselves into a different place?
Exactly. So it really has everything to do with the parent.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. If you have a highly behavioral kid, the parent can't hear you. If they're like, if your kid's between like 12 and 14 and things are hitting the roof and there's no control whatsoever, the parent can't hear you. Right? There is a small window where If you're, like I say, puberty hits, things escalate. And as much as we want to be able to say we can go in, our life becomes so chaotic, we get pulled out. Like if I meet a mother whose child is in that category, I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep this person in my thoughts and my prayers and everything, and I'm going to contact her in a couple years and know that there's a place for her to come and see the light now, because there's times where it doesn't feel like there's light at all, right? But if we look at up until 12 years old and after 14 years, or if the child's behaviors aren't that great, like that overwhelming, 100% it's about coming within. And the thing that I didn't realize with Ethan, and this is something that has been one of the most powerful shifts that him and I have made, the more that we actually do the work on ourselves and come into our bodies and then live in our truth and our purpose and our stardust, it actually shifts what they truly believe and see as being opportunity for them in their life too. Right? Because we get frantic, we leave our body, we make it about them. They think that this is normal. They think this is regular. They think that life is always going to be this chaos. Right? But when you go and you say like, oh, listen, you're right. This is, so for me, where my other children are concerned now, I have very strong boundaries, but the time I spend with them is exceptional time, that they know that the more I focus on serving and the more I focus on being in the capacity to bring people into and change their lives and shift their energy and do all these kinds of things, my children start to see that the world is full of endless possibility, that they are not stuck in any one place at any one time, that they can do something in a moment or a time that can shift their reality and shift where their path is going, because I'm mirroring it. I'm showing them that that's a possibility.
Yeah, that's a really important lesson, I think. Can we talk a little bit more? You've said several times, or referred to getting back into your body, or like we've left our bodies. And what do you mean by that? Because I'm not sure everybody's sort of familiar with that kind of terminology.
When things become really chaotic inside, so like if you're having family issues, not just your own personal like kid issues. So when I started down meditating, I started to hear angels, right? So a whole spiritual path awakened in front of me, so that when I go talking about all this kind of stuff, people understand what I'm doing. And then when I wrote My Kid Is Driving Me Crazy, I had to get over my fear that if I said my story, my family would disown me. Which is what I had lived with for so long. So I busted open what is considered your throat, or your vehicle for your message, and the root, which is the foundation of who we are. So that all that family stuff. And so I downloaded that I could read chakras. Now in that excess of reading chakras, it's just reading energy in different capacities, like different floors of a house, if you will. So what happens is when we leave our body is, think about you becoming a hoarder in your own body. Okay, so you start to like collect things that don't belong to you. So let's just say at the belly button, everybody's heard of a solar plexus. It's yellow, it's like a bright sun, and somehow we all know about it. And I'm going to talk about this one because this is our belief systems in ourselves. And say over time, you start to collect, that my fear was that my family, everyone would think I was a bad mother. Right? That's a belief that we start to live in. We start to carry it, and we start to like imagine you've got this beautiful floor of the 7-floor body, and you start collecting boxes of things that people could say to you, or maybe have said to you. Maybe they said you're lazy, or you're not worth it, or that nothing you do is good enough, or that you won't be able to be successful, or all these kinds of things. So we fill that floor with boxes. Maybe things that, like I said, in your house life, so with your biological parents, if you're adopted, if you have kids that are, suffer from mental illness, or a lot of kids, or things like that, you start to collect energy in there. You're seeking the approval of other people. You're always afraid of judgment. You lose track of yourself. You fill the house with boxes. And so as each of these floors get filled with all of these boxes, it's not very comfortable to be in here anymore, right? Like we're like, oh, this is a lot of work in here. Like I should probably clean this out, and I'm not comfortable doing it right now. And so if I get distracted, or I pull myself out and start helping everybody, or tell myself that's what I'm doing, if I need to like fix this person, or be a part of moving everybody on the weekend, and I'm going to help everybody with their dinner parties, and I'm going to do all of these kinds of things, you physically are doing amazing things in your life, and you're looking at it going like, look, I'm a helpy helperson. Look at how many people I serve in a day, right? but it doesn't feel good. You're tired, you're overwhelmed. It feels like you can't keep up. Everything seems to be going like, you lose time. This is where you live in the world of like, I don't have enough time, and there's not enough hours in a day to take care of myself. Now, anything can get you, like, so like sick parents, child with mental illness, if you have a genetic disease, sometimes that will pull us out of our body because we get angry with our body. So we just don't want to be in here dealing with the stuff or the emotions or the feelings that our life has brought up until this moment. So it's easier just to get distracted by leaving. It's just like you might not notice that it's out, except you will feel like you have zero control over anything. That's what being out feels like.
And of course, that can lead to a lot of feelings of victimization as well, right? It's that like life is just throwing all this junk at me, and again, I'm out of control. I don't have any agency over anything. Everything's just happening.
Nobody knows how hard my life is. Nobody's there to help me. Like, there's a whole lot of, yes, negative talk out there.
How did you stumble upon meditation? And what type did you end up doing? Because there's a bunch of different ways to meditate, of course.
Yes. So what happened was, like I said, I started to say, what can I do today to just feel a little bit better? And now you'll notice that I had said before, I'm a bad mom, everything is like this. And like, so I'd had that negative self-talk. I was in this fear-based cycle. And so of course I would always receive proof of fear-based stuff like that. I was a bad mom, that people were going to talk to me, that everybody thought I was a terrible person, things like that. But the minute I shifted my thought to what can I do to feel better, right? That's a big question to ask for help with. And so things started to appear. And I remember scrolling through my Facebook, and it's like this Meditate with the Angels by Carrie Samuels. I can vividly still remember. It's like it kind of came out of the computer at me, and I thought, well, I'm asking for help, and this seems to be what I'm being guided to, so I'm just going to click on it. Right? And so for 30 days, these meditations would be sent to my email, and I would put them on and sleep through every single one. All 30 of them. I did not stay awake. It was magic. I call it meta napping, because like she would say, now relax. And I'd be like, and then it would be like, now come back into your body. And I'd come back and I'd be like, 20 minutes, like what just happened? But it was really because my house was so full. I had to like get some assistance. So my subconscious mind had to go in and start unpacking some of the boxes for me, because my conscious mind, it was too big of a job for the Tamara, the conscious Tamara, to do. And then after I started, so I just started, like, it was really, there is no right or wrong. You just have to be in a space. Our minds are meant to be going 24/7. So to think that you have this peace of mind or this elusive like meditation where your thoughts don't happen isn't real. Like, and so I started to just Google how I was feeling. I needed to like meditation for anxiety. If you go onto YouTube, there's a million meditations, meditation for energy, meditation for not feeling like you have the cold or flu. I mean, any meditation, I started to just Google them, and I started to just do them repeatedly every single day because I had no other energy to do anything else. Right? And so for 3 years now, I've been in a meditation practice. And of course they evolve and change. And it's just like whatever feels good for you energetically, you do. And it took years before I would actually sit in silence with myself. Right? Everything was a guided meditation. Something had to have music or words to keep me in a space where my brain wasn't going like, and now you got to get the groceries, and now you got to go get the kids, and now you got to think about this for your job, and now you got to do that. Because it was like such a busy window.
Yeah, it's like the gateway meditation, right? to the heavy stuff. Yeah, and I know that series actually. I have that myself. So yeah, Carrie Samuels does great work. Maybe I'll include a link to that too, just for fun. Yeah. If I remember to do that. Okay, so things started shifting. You started feeling better. You started connecting with something greater than yourself, outside of yourself, which then ironically helps you connect with the inside of yourself, right?
Totally.
Sort of a paradox there.
It was like this like hand to hold when I went in to go and do the work. Now at the same time that I was going in to do the work, I started being led to different groups. Like, so I joined different programs, or I would sign up for different things because I knew that I needed to figure out who I was again. And so I joined a year-long mentorship program at a low cost, and I thought, wow, this woman's got it together. But the thing is like, if you actually connect the dots backwards from where you currently are, I joined a year-long mentorship program with really spiritual people, like people who saying I talked to angels was normal, like, and accepted. And so I spent a year in this beautiful pool of people, right? And then I realized that I wanted to help everybody around the world. Like, I knew that I was meant to have an online program that would help people, didn't matter where they lived, right? And so then I found myself, like, people I were watching would be talking about a different program, right? So I started to energetically want to raise my vibration to match the people that I wanted to be. And so I started to, like, slowly surround myself, or to lift myself into a next level vibration by choosing to join or to accept or to be a part of something with that vibration that was slightly higher than me, like stepping up a ladder, right? And so yes, there was that piece of going within, but I always had a hand there helping me do the thing that I needed to do, because our current self will always be like, this is a bad idea if you do this, because we know what to say to ourselves to stop ourselves from doing the things. If you do this, this person's going to say this person's going to say that, all of these things are going to fall apart, and you'll have this whole script that you'll tell yourself. So having that hand to hold really was able to elevate me as well.
So let's go back a little to Ethan.
Yeah.
Because I want to put this full circle. So you sort of told us the happy ending in a, you skip to the end there.
Yeah.
But so you start sort of doing all of this work on yourself. You start asking for and receiving help.
Starting to listen to it. The key is to listen, because we're all receiving all the time, right? But like, we don't know. So like, when you get out of your own thoughts, it would be like, okay, contact this person, and I would just like go like, okay, right? Like, it wasn't like, why would I contact that person? So you get to a place of listening is the next step to what you're receiving.
And during, at least initially, this period, you've got no contact with your son. He's just gone. Do you have any idea how he's doing? You don't know if he's...
Of course.
You did?
Oh, because my family wouldn't, let that all fall to the wayside on some level. I mean, I tried to, but for me, looking back, it was like, the more I could disconnect from the patterns and the cycles and things like that, the better off we could rebuild with. But at the time, no, my family knew where he was. Like, he wasn't disconnected from everybody else. It was disconnected from me. He ended up moving cities, which was a great decision. So he ended up putting himself back in that residence anyway. After, right? He met a girl. He moved to another city. He started to get his life together. But he was doing it for him, right? So all of a sudden, he didn't have helicopter mom that was trying to rule his life like a puppet, right? So you took away all of that, and he realized that he could stand on his own 2 feet, and he could make better decisions. He could take charge of his life. He could do these things. And so, but I always heard back. Family,
okay.
Your whole family does not turn your back on your child, like, as you did. Like,
got it. Okay. I just wanted to kind of clarify that. So it sounds like you really believe that both the physical, the energetic distance from you in particular as his mom gave him finally sort of the space, took the pressure off him to get better, made him feel less like he needed fixing. And that, you think that's really what in part allowed him to heal, because he did actually need some healing. Yes. I mean, there were very specific things that weren't going well with his.
So like, when I always explain, like, when we're codependent with somebody and we feel responsible for them, we carry them in our heart. So their source conversation is blocked because it runs through us to get to them. So it makes us exhausted, and it doesn't allow them to have their own conversation with the universe. So here I had removed him and given him a chance to have his own energetic conversation with the universe and with source, and didn't feel responsible for carrying him anymore. Which in itself has empowered him to say that the breakup that we had is the best decision that ever happened to him. right? So to get to a full circle around where he can say, oh, like he will say thank you that we did that.
Interesting. Okay. And how old is he now?
He is 20 years old.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, just in February. I could have a 20-year-old. That's like, when did that happen?
Okay. Because I still feel like, and this, I may be projecting this on other people, and I do have a 12-year-old, so we may be in the midst of the tough years right now. I don't know, who are still thinking like, I just can't get there. I mean, how can people get where you got without going as far as you went? I guess maybe is my question.
I love that. Yeah. That is, yeah. So like, there comes a point where you detach yourself emotionally from your kid, not to the point of breaking up, but where you can detach and say like, okay, like from I'm going to let them be independent beings in their own life and start to make their own decisions and make their own mistakes. And I'm not responsible for that. I've taught them everything that I possibly can. Like I've spent my entire life teaching them right or wrong, how, like, you know what I mean? How to be the best versions of themselves, all of these things. And when you can allow your child to start to like I said, have their own conversation, to learn that the messaging that they were put on this earth to do, right? Because we are not like, they are actually living their own version of what we've lived, right? But the more we try and steer it and guide it and be responsible for it, we're really just putting obstacles up for them for their journey. So we get to a place where you can detach yourself from the fact that they need to learn these things. This is part of the process. This is with love that they, you know, fall in the creek, or, you know what I mean, get their hearts broken. All of these things start to define who they are in their own independence, right? And so when I say detach yourself emotionally, it doesn't have to be to that extent of breaking up, but there is a place where you say, okay, I know my kid's going to be okay. I know that they're on their journey and that they are supported in a way that even I can't give them. This gives me space and time now to realize that who I am and what I'm doing is more like a really impactful, powerful way that I can be the best, what is the word I want to say? Not teacher, because we're not teaching them anything, but showing them, you know, the more I live in my purpose and who I'm here to serve and what my journey is, the more I'm going to show them that anything is, like I said, possible for their own journey, that we respectfully, lovingly let them go on.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Looking at our time, I want to make sure that we give you a chance to chat a little bit about kind of what it is you do now and how you work with because you really do a lot of work with parents who, for various reasons, are home with their kids, right? And are looking for actually really practical ways to make that possible for themselves, so that they can make a living doing.
Well, it's a really powerful place. So like one of the things that came out of when I started meditating and things is the fact that I can read people's energy, right? So I can go in and see where your store, how many boxes you have, and like if there's any boxes, and you know, how heavily the boxes are stopping you right now, and like how many levels of like cleaning you need, and all sorts of things. So when that gift was given to me, really came through in February of last year. And so like I said, I always had somebody holding my hand to help me unpack my boxes, because unpacking the boxes is not like your favorite thing to do in the land. You don't go like, yay, I'm going to go into, like, have you ever moved and you walk into the room that you've placed everything that you have to go through, and you're like, why did I do this? Like, why? Like, right? And so you usually call for somebody to come and help you go through it and pack that thing up, right? And so in the last year, through reading other people's energy, I created a program called the Chakra Business Academy. And the Chakra Business Academy is about going within to each and every single chakra. First and foremost, though, you find out what your stardust is, right? So like we're born with the very essence of what we are meant to do. Like we come to earth with it. Like we're born with it in our hearts. And so finding out what it is, and it usually begins with your story as your stardust. There's a reason, like we said, we've taken this very specific road or this specific journey to get us to today. So we go in and vibrationally find that stardust. That is the light within you that you were born with. And then as we're unpacking all the boxes, we infuse this light. And so you step into this place of being able to be confident, clear within yourself, knowing exactly who you're meant to serve and why, and then doing whatever the action is to make that. And you do it. I've been living and working as an entrepreneur from home since I was, I don't know, Ethan was in grade 6. So, I mean, it's been a long time. And so when you have a child with mental illness, working from home becomes something that becomes very valuable and very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if people are kind of curious about learning more about the work that you do, where can they reach you?
They can reach me by just sending an email at Tamara, Tamara, at The Enchanted Fairy. So The Enchanted Fairy is written on here. And fairy is FAIRY.ca. I would say my website, but it's crashed right now, so it will be up. So I'm not going to send you there, but if you just send me an email, I would love to have a conversation. If you want a book, I'll give you a book. If you want to know more about what I do, I would gladly be able to share that with anyone.
Okay, that's great, because I think a lot of people, yeah, and you know, I have both books myself. I think they're both worth reading for sort of different reasons. And, you know, a lot to be learned, I think, just from reading about somebody else's sort of journey through this and having really come out the other side, really a completely different person, would you say? You know, I mean, or that's maybe not the way to put it. You're more yourself now than you were before.
Yeah, it's like I reconnected. So when I said that 10-year-old self, I became the daughter of mental illness. Like, so I actually reunited the Tamara that was up to 10 with the Tamara in the last 3 years. It's like I bridged the gap between those two. And so now I am more fully Tamara than I can remember being since I was 10.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of appeal in that to a lot of parents who feel like they've been drowning, frankly, for years and have lost their sense of who they are, and their identity is sort of become narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower to just the parent of this child or these children. I know amazingly there are some parents out there who have, you know, 2, 3, 4, even 5, 6 of kids, all of whom are struggling with different issues, and it's just like, oh my gosh, how you know, they're lost. And they're looking for sort of a way out to kind of reclaim themselves, which ultimately can only be of benefit to our children, right?
Yes. It's the journey of within. The answer's right. Like, one of the things is the answer is always within us. Like, it really, really is. It's hard to see until you do it. Like, it's hard for it to be real until you're in it, to notice the difference, to feel the difference, to see the chaos going around you and think the chaos is controlling you, to taking it back in and going like, no, this isn't chaos if I look at it from being this way as opposed to being this way. It's like, this is so much more manageable. This is so much more grounding. I can be able to see it through different eyes. Yeah,
no, that sounds wonderful. And as you admitted, I think it also sounds impossible to a lot of people. So, you know, they think, well, that's great. That worked for her, but that'll never work for me. My situation is entirely different.
You know, when people say that to me when I start working with them, though, they're like, you're going to have to hold my belief in this when we start doing this together until I can believe you, Tamara. And I say, I will hold space for that. Like, that's what it's about. I'll hold space because I've created the space within myself to hold it for you until you can create the space to hold it for yourself. 100%.
Yeah, because I do think that for some people, it's just like it's too far of a step to get from where they are to where they may desperately want to be, but they just can't get to that vision of what's possible for them.
I know. The most incredible thing is it's always closer than you think. It's always closer than you think.
Oh, I like that.
It really
Yeah,
is.
that's lovely. Maybe that's a really good place to end, right? That
Yeah.
it's not so far down the road, and that it's maybe not quite so large a leap as we may have allowed ourselves to believe that it is. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, and I hope some folks will take advantage of getting a copy of your book. And for some folks, it may be that they're at the time in their life where maybe embarking on one of your programs makes a lot of sense for them. So I encourage people to check out the website, which we just was confident we'll be back up
It
and
will be
working
back out
by
by
the
the end
time
of this month for
this interview
sure.
goes live. Yeah. So thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Tamara, for joining us. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. I hope that you found some value in this, and that you've got a lot of hope for what's possible for you going forward, and that you take some time to find yourself again. So thank you so much, everyone, and that's it for today. All right then. Bye-bye.